Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, you see the article, it reads New South African president to return land from whites back to Black South Africans. And I will read this. It's out of Telesur, and a lot of people have been talking about it, and it's gotten a lot of praise from the Black community that they have leaders that are trying to stand up and take back land that was stolen from South Africans originally. And so while Black South Africans are 79% of the population, they own only 1.2% of the rural land. South Africa's new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has promised to return land owned by whites to Black South Africans. The land distribution program said the newly sworn in president would be done through expropriation without compensation. So the expropriation of land without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate the redistribution of land to Black South Africans, said Ramaphosa. During a speech to Parliament on Tuesday, Ramaphosa explained that the program is one based on equity. So who is Cyril Ramaphosa? He's South Africa's new president. And so no one is saying that the land must be taken away from our people, he said. Rather, it's how that we can make sure that our people have equitable access to land and security of tenure. So we must see this process to accelerated land redistribution as an opportunity and not as a threat, according to a recent land audit report. Now, this is the thing that struck me. And the first thing I thought of was here in America, in the US, all the historical corruption and collusion and greediness. Just with this paragraph alone, it says they had a land auditor go out, and while Black Africans numbered 79% of the population, they only owned 1.2% of the rural land in the country. Meanwhile, white people in the country only were 9% of the population, but they owned a whopping 23.6% of its rural land and an additional 11.4% of the land in towns and cities. In the 90s and 2000, program was carried out Robert Mugabe. Unfortunately, it had led to an economic downturn, a large one, with food production plummeting in the country. So as such, Ramaphosa assured, in dealing with the complex matter, we will not make that others have made. And so that's the whole article to the entirety. So this was the South African president. His name was Jacob Zuma. He resigned. And so Cyril Ramaphosa is about to take over. And so he's here. You see a photo of him, and he's pictured in the parliament in Cape Town. And so he's the new president of South Africa. And so I've also seen some other articles, which I will go to those. Okay, so new South African president to return land from whites back to South Africans. And so this is where I was. And it's in Telesur. If you're looking for that article, you can read it for yourself. And so I was looking at Business Insider, and I was looking at some other articles as well that talk about the whole incidents behind this. So South Africa's new president wants to redistribute land from white farmers. And so this is him, Cyril Ramaphosa. And so he's replaced the scandal-ridden Jacob Zuma, okay? And so it goes into details about the other president who was the former president of is the former president of South Africa. So it says, if you've been following much international news, you've probably heard that after literally years of scandal, abuse, and incompetence, South Africa's president, Jacob Zuma, was finally forced to resign last week. This is a really big deal in South Africa as of now, and the country has been suffering for nearly a decade under Zuma's corruption. So the people are certainly hoping that the new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, will represent a positive new chapter in South Africa. Yesterday, Ramaphosa addressed the nation parliament in Cape Town and made clear that his priority is to heal the divisions and the injustices of the past, going all the way back to the original European colonists in the 1600s, taking land from the indigenous tribes, which were Africans. Ramaphosa called this an original sin. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The statement that he wants to see, or the stated that he wants to see, is the return of the land to the people whom it is originally for, that it was taken from, to heal the divisions of the past, of course. So how does he plan to do this? Confiscation, specifically confiscation without compensation. So the expropriation of land without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate redistribution of land to Black South Africans. Ramaphosa minced no words. He's talking about them taking back land from white farmers and giving it to the Black South Africans. Astonishingly, he has followed up the statement by saying that we will handle it in a way that is not going to damage the economy. So this is where they're kind of forewarning that it could end up going wrong, and depending on what model they follow. And so apparently there is a history in Zimbabwe, so it goes into it. It says, wow, what a relief. For a moment, it sounded like South Africa wants to do what Zimbabwe did for several years ago. Oh, wait, that's exactly what they want to do, is Zimbabwe, what they did. Seeking to correct similar colonial apartheid-era injustices in his country, Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe initiated a land redistribution program between the years of 1999 to the early 2000s. So thousands of white-owned farmers were confiscated, or their lands, the farms were confiscated by the government, and the farmers were forced out. So bear in mind that Zimbabwe used to be known as a breadbasket of Southern Africa. And so Zimbabwe's world-class farmers were major food exporters to the rest of the region. And so basically they were the resource to go to in terms of food in the land. But when you take those people out of the land, here's what happens. So, but within a few years, Mugabe's land distribution food production plummeted. Without its professional, experienced farmers, the nation went from being agriculture export powerhouse to having to rely on handouts from the UN World Food Program. So, inflation and multi-decade of depression followed thereafter. So if there's an economic model in the world you do not wish to or wouldn't want to follow, would be Zimbabwe's model. So, and you don't think that the politicians in the neighboring South Africa would know this already, because they've seen it firsthand, is what they're saying. They had a front row seat to the effects of Mugabe's land redistribution, not to mention they had to absorb millions of starving Zimbabweans, refugees who came across the borders, yet this is precisely the policy they want to adopt, which means they're going to go back and do something that may end up not working out. It's a possibility because of what has happened before. So however you might feel about social justice, it seems pretty clear a copy in Zimbabwe is a pretty stupid idea and will only end up hurting people that they claim they want to help. Yet the president claims that they want to initiate a land redistribution program that won't impact the economy or South Africa's food security. Well, yeah, sure. And I want to be a starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys next season. But sadly, you won't see Simon Black throwing any touchdowns, passes anytime soon. That's sarcasm. Basically saying that that's because we have to live in a world with certain realities and limitations. And with that being said, it's so many people have their hand, greedy people have their hand in the government that, that it's going to be hard to combat these type of ills. So it goes on in the article to say that one of the realities is that land distribution, even if you believe the intentions to be noble, never usually works. So, and of course, the most important reality is that anyone who willfully chooses to copy Zimbabwe's economic model deserves to suffer the consequences of the stupidity. And so that's basically that in a nutshell, what it's saying. There are other articles too that read about the whole event occurring and how they feel about it. And so there's been many efforts, even here in the States, in America, we know what has happened to people who are leaders. Either they've been silenced, they've been ostracized, they've been discredited, blackballed from society, or they've been assassinated with surveillance to where they find something they can dig up on them so they can incarcerate them and lock and throw away the key forever. And so it seems like there's always something whenever somebody tries to stand up for the rights of people who have been oppressed for a long time, primarily Black community, there's always got to be somebody that has their hand in that whole conversation to try to derail it or to make it look as though your efforts are effortless or that they're going to be derailed. And some of that is true because you have so many people that are involved in these organizations that are at the top that are looking to pretty much discredit you, are looking to see your demise happen. And so a lot of times you have to fight against a system that's already been pretty much built up through a racist government. And these people are demanding that they take their land back, which I agree wholeheartedly. I see their efforts and I understand their point, and it's taken well by me. But the thing is that you do have people who are very corrupt, and they can be from the same background and they may not have your best interest at heart. But what I'm saying is that when you're looking at this is not unlike what has happened in most of the other countries. And so we just have to wait and see how it plays out. There's been so much that has been done to people for so long that you rarely see anybody trying to stand up and do anything about it. But when they do, all their efforts are thwarted, or there's always a derailment. There's always some kind of entity or obstacle that'll step in the way and create havoc for those efforts that people have tried to forego. So I don't know what's going to become of this, but I have seen a lot of this on the net. I've seen a lot of people talking about it and conversing about it and putting in their criticism as to how they feel about the whole thing. I think it's noble of people to stand up and speak out. And so you have some people who want to see that, more of that. But we know what happens. We know some people are there because they're there for show. And then we know some people are not just there for show. They're actually going to do something about it. But how many people have tried to do things about things here, even in the States, and we've seen what has happened to them, in their efforts, because there's always something there, always someone or somebody's there that try to do damage or discredit those individuals who are trying to do right by numbers of people who are not ever heard, who are voiceless, who remain voiceless in society. And so with that being said, That's just some of the article right there. There are many other articles that relate to this same fight. And you have new South African leader faces old question: is there a will to fight the corruption? So it goes on to talk about the corruptions that have happened even in Africa. And so, with that means saying that, there are a lot of people I've seen saying that they want to go back to Africa and they want to move out of the States because of all of the bad things that have happened here. But if you leave one problem, trust me, there's problems everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's going to be something you're going to be faced with. It's not to say that there isn't a history and there isn't things that have happened in these countries. And we're seeing this here, that there's corruption everywhere. It's not just in America that things have happened. There's things that have happened in other places too. Um, so just because you leave one place doesn't mean that you're free from corruption. It just means you're going to a new battleground, basically. That's my opinion. So I think it would be more wiser to stay and fight where you already reside, where you know where you stand, rather than go to a new fight and you don't know anything, you don't know enough about the history, you're not informed or well informed on the history of that place you're going to. The other thing is as people see, everywhere you go, there's something. The only thing that I could say about South Africa and African countries is that the representation might be better in terms of you being a Black person, because the numbers are high and it's prevalent that there are many Black people that live in those countries, that the possible chance of you being represented as a human being rather than just based on just race will be more evident, that would be a possibility, be stronger, rather than here in the States where they do focus a lot on your racial background and to look at it as a negative, in a situation when it comes to the judicial system or when you're trying to be represented, like I say, like by law enforcement and court, and when you're trying to access certain wealth building opportunities, that you have enough support. And so usually even in the States, you have to find people that you can trust, that are going to support you despite who you are and your background and your cultural beliefs. And with this being said, this is just one of many articles. Right now it's impeded by this article asking me if I want to ascribe to the New York Times, because I read a lot of New York Times. I read The Hill. I read a lot of stuff about politics, a lot of things about Capitol Hill, and so I get a lot of ads normally. But anyway, with that being said, yeah, so I think people should read about this. There could be some good that comes out of this. Hopefully they won't make the same mistake that Zimbabwe has made. So I don't know. I think this is a story worth following. With that being said, thanks for listening. Bye. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.